Tony Goldwyn, this season has been obviously a proverbial roller coaster for you and your character Fitz. He was romantic with Olivia in Vermont. He was betrayed by Sally Langston, his dad, his best buddy. He was paternal with his kids. He had a huge tragedy in the finale. I just can't imagine what more Shonda Rhimes could have thrown at you. Tell us about your view of how season 3 panned out for Fitz.
Yeah, well, it sure was full of surprises. I mean, I was, in typical Shonda Rhimes fashion, it just never stopped changing. So I really loved it. The thing that I had expected when I signed on to do a regular role in a television show is I expected, okay, after a couple of years, it's going to start to feel really familiar, and you'll feel like you're beginning to repeat yourself, and you have to figure that's an actor's problem you have to solve, and that's just never happened on Scandal. So what I thought was really kind of great, and again classic Shonda, was that Fitz went to a really dark place, and I think became, sort of halfway to 2/3 of the way through the season, really kind of unattractive. I think he behaved badly. It was understandable because of all that he was wrestling with, but she had this way of pushing it right to the edge of the envelope, and then redeeming him in this way in the last couple of episodes, from the time he finds out about Mellie's infidelity, and then, actually really in the last episode when he finds out about the rape and embraces her and tries to take care of her, and then they have this devastating loss of their child, in which I think one's heart breaks for this guy Fitz, and Mellie together, and as a kind of team, even though they're such a troubled couple.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on one of the things you mentioned there, and that was Fitz became, he became a little whiny and frustrated and a very angry guy towards the middle of the season, and there was some backlash against him by fans and viewers that I'm not sure how you felt about that, but what was your reaction to when people started getting really pissed off at Fitz?
Well, I kind of agreed with them. I mean, I always take Fitz's point of view, so I felt like, his where he was coming from was human, so I was okay with it. But when people were angry at him, I understood, and I think when I read people's condemnations of Fitz on Twitter, and when I disagreed with them. I felt they weren't really looking at it from Fitz's point of view, but why should they? They're watching the show, and a lot of them were much more embracing of Mellie through all of that struggle, because they, of course, the audience knew what Fitz did not, that Mellie had been raped by his father. So subtracting that from the equation, Fitz's perspective on Mellie when he found out about Andrew was that, about her affair with Andrew, his perspective on Mellie was that this is a woman who never loved him, who was using him politically because he was from a powerful family and had a bright future ahead of him, and she hitched her wagon, to his fortunes. And the whole thing of her denying him not only sex, but any physical contact for 10 years in a marriage, that's a very destructive thing. And when he realized, as he thought, that it was because she didn't love him and she loved someone else, that it wasn't that he was jealous, it was that I think he felt that she had, in a sense, destroyed their family, and their children never had a chance at a whole home. And he never had a chance to actually experience them as a happy couple because she pushed him away. Now, of course, if anybody knows that she'd been raped, it's completely understandable, and Fitz becomes an asshole, But Fitz did not know that. So that's my sort of defense of Fitz. But beyond that, he was petulant and irritable and angry and unfair and whiny at times, and not a lot of fun to be around. But I at the time I loved that Shonda was doing that, because she just doesn't. She's not interested in making us likable. She's interested in making us compelling.
Yeah, and to a certain extent real. But look, I got to say, in Fitz's defense, I'm looking at the chat room. There's a lot of people who are saying, I was never pissed at Fitz, and Fitz is a good guy, and he can do no wrong. And there's even someone who, I think Jen has a good point where she says she was never pissed off at Fitz because he had no one in his corner. And how was he to know what was going on with Mellie and so forth? So at least, you know, there are some people who are still backing you.
Good, but that's also one of the other wonderful things about the show is, you know, people debate this because people look at it through different lenses. And, you know, like the whole thing with Jake and Olivia and me and Olivia, you know, people are Team Jake and Team Olivia to it. And literally Scott Foley and I were in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and people would come up to us at parties and want to take pictures with us, but some would like shove me out of the way and say, I'm sorry, I just need you to know I'm Team Jake. And others would shove him out of the way and say, I'm Team Fitz, I just want a picture with the president, you know. So
oh my God.
That's the fun of it.
That is cool, and let's just quickly talk about the social media aspect of the show, because I usually bring this up with all the Scandal people because, you know, I've obviously had the opportunity to speak to so many different people from so many different shows, but there's nothing like this. Even Sci-Fi is not even close to the rabid support that the fans have for the show, and that you guys have such a great presence on social media. How did that all come about? Was that a natural progression for you, or is it something new that you adapted to when you became part of the show?
Well, as I think we've discussed in the past, I was illiterate on social media. I was kind of afraid of it. I was slightly snobby about it. You know, my kids were into it, and the notion of Twitter being a medium where you communicate your thoughts in 140 characters or less was kind of offensive to me. I thought, well, that's what's wrong with our society, damn it. But Shonda, you know, when Shonda gives you an instruction, you obey. And Shonda and Kerry were big enthusiasts, and they said, we need to do this. So, of course, I thought, all right, well, let's check it out. And I was a little intimidated at first, but from the moment we did our first live tweet, I got it. And you know, after being the sort of fear of that first tweet when you hit the button and think, oh, my God, thousands of people are going to read that, you know, I realized the power of it, and then when I started interacting with fans, it became such a fun thing, and now I'm on Twitter all the time. I use it every day for many different purposes, to talk about work, to talk about charities, to talk about causes. Life, to just hear what people are interested in. Yeah.
It just becomes part of your life. It is quite amazing how much it's changed everything. But let's go back to the show, because there's some real highlights that I want to talk about. Firstly, you and I have talked about your directing before, and last time you said that it was heaven because it gave you such a different perspective and you were able to work at Pope and Associates, which the president obviously didn't do. But you said it was challenging, and now that you've been there, done that, you've got quite a lot of experience on that side of the camera. You directed Mama Said Knock You Out this past season, which was obviously one of the most pivotal episodes. Was there anything different about this one in particular in terms of your directing of it?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Verica, you know, they sort of had, I wasn't originally supposed to direct that one. I was supposed to direct one of the later ones, but then they shortened the season for Kerry's pregnancy. And, you know, when I found out that was the one I was going to be directing, I had not, you know, as you know, we get the scripts very, very late. And Tom Verica, one of our producers and, you know, my favorite director on the show, texted me going, well, you haven't seen the outline yet, but it's a good thing you're not in this one much. And I kind of laughed and thought, oh, phew, thank God. And I saw the script, and I'm in almost every scene of it. So that was the big challenge for this one. And that, you know, there was a lot that Fitz had to deal with in that episode, because it was the introduction of the children, and then the big, you know, shock of Mellie's relationship with Andrew, and that big fight scene with Mellie. So that was a really interesting challenge to have that as an actor. You know, there were challenges last season too, in the one that I directed, which was a huge episode, but they were different.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's actually talk about probably the biggest thing of last season. That was the death of Fitz's son, which I must say, I was really lucky to not be spoiled by this, and so when I watched the finale a few weeks ago, I just couldn't believe it. I was just so taken aback, and then obviously as a father like you, that kind of thing really hits a raw nerve for me and for all viewers. And I always wonder. It seems like an obvious question, but I'm curious. As an actor, what are you drawing on for that type of performance? Because Fitz really loses it. He has a full breakdown, and that must have been terribly difficult for you to achieve.
It was terrible. Yeah, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as an actor, because I have children that age, you know, somewhat older, but, you know, losing a child is just, it's a parent's worst nightmare. So I don't like to think about that much. And yet I had to go there, you know, so that was extremely unpleasant. And I had become very quickly fond of Dylan, who played, you know, my son. But really, you know, as an actor, you substitute your own life experiences. So, of course, in those scenes where Fitz is struggling with that, I had to think about what that would mean to me to lose a child, one of my children specifically. So it was rough. It was not a pleasant thing, but that's what we do.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sure you're used to it. You've been there and done that before. But yeah, it was a real, I wouldn't say highlight of the season, but it was certainly the thing that has stuck with me as the most shocking. It's typical of Shonda Rhimes, and she was throwing everything at us in that finale. I just couldn't. I was looking at my wife thinking, what else could possibly happen? And then you had the thing with Rowan Pope, and then you had, it was a crazy bananas.
I know when we did the table read for that episode, because as you know, we never know what's going to happen in the script until we read it together. And so at the end of every act, we were just, our jaws were on the floor. You know, Fitz finds out about the rape. Olivia tells him, right? Oh my God! And Shonda, only act one. Just wait. And then all of a sudden, you know, every single act, something extraordinary happened, and then culminating with the death of Jerry. I mean, we were all crying, and we were all just like, could not believe it. And then to find out that it was Rowan. Oh my God! That was a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. When I spoke to Joe Morton a couple of weeks ago, he was kind of explaining how it works at the table read, and he's saying, like, people look at you and say, "I can't believe you said that," and it just starts getting slightly personal and hilarious. And so I can imagine that's quite a highlight of your week, to get that script and sit down with your castmates.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about Mellie, because she has now also become quite a fan favorite. You know, lots of fans have rallied behind her. I'm speaking to Bellamy in a few minutes, actually, today. And Mellie, you know, we got to learn more about her. And now I think, obviously, the dynamic between Mellie and the president has changed somewhat. What do you think that dynamic will be going forward?
Well, you know, I really thought that last scene between Fitz and Mellie was so beautiful and complicated, and very, very difficult, not just emotionally. You know, when Fitz is holding all that in, then he comes into the Oval by himself and has this private moment where he falls to his knees and is just bereft. And Mellie comes in to take care of him, and Fitz has this line saying, "Where's Olivia?" And when we did it in the table read, I remember Columbus Short screamed at him. He's like, "Oh man, come on, dude!" You know? Like, that's cold. But I realized he wasn't saying, "I don't want you, I want Olivia." He wasn't rejecting Mellie. At that moment, what Mellie was saying to him was, "We need to proceed. You've just been reelected. You need to speak to the American people. We have a job to do. We have to get up and do what we do." Right. And Olivia is an essential part of that for both of them. So there was this bizarre acknowledgement of Olivia being the third part of this relationship. And Mellie's acknowledgement of that, and Fitz's kind of stating of the obvious, kind of, so that Fitz and Mellie sharing this terrible grief and loss, and Mellie having blamed herself for being a bad mother, you know, and Fitz trying to take care of her in that way. They had taken care of each other, and now they need to move forward as the president and the first lady, and they're this kind of more bonded than they've ever been in a funny way, but Olivia, in their minds, is an essential component in that. And so they've transcended to some new place, I think. Not that they won't backslide, you know, and I don't know what the hell's going to happen when Fitz finds out that Olivia's disappeared. Whether he thinks she's dead, or whether where's Jake, or whether he thinks she ran off a jet. I have no idea what's going to happen, but it does leave Mellie and Fitz in a new place, which again is a testament to what Shonda Rhimes does. She goes to uncharted territory with these characters all the time and these relationships. So as we saw in season 3 compared to season 2, season 4 is going to go to some other place that, look, I don't know what it is. It's one of the great joys of being in this show, is it's kind of like life. You know, you know as your character where your character wants to go, you know what your character wants to have happen, but we have no clue how things are going to evolve, and that's very lifelike. And it's a real acting lesson, frankly, because you always want to be in that state of not knowing as an actor, even if you've kind of planned out. You know what I mean? There's this kind of that willing suspension of disbelief, but in our case, we really don't know.
Well, that's right. You know, you got to play things by ear. That's how life is. You have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, and that's what makes a show so much more compelling. Now, Emmy voters ignored the show in the first year. Then last year, it got a couple of nominations and a win for Dan Bukatinsky, which was really exciting. And Kerry Washington probably just missed out on the Best Drama Actress Emmy. This year, we're hoping that Emmy voters will continue to pay some more attention to this show, because it is so huge, so popular, and so well done. If they are good enough, I'm just going to put this out there to the Emmy voters, if they're good enough to recognize your performance as Best Supporting Actor on the show, have you thought about your favorite or best episode that you would submit to the judges?
Wow. It's so funny, you know, you learn as an actor literally not to think about these things. Not because it's so like I don't want to jinx it. It's just so much about doing, but just frankly, feel so grateful for the work. But if I had to submit an episode, I don't know. God, perhaps the last one.
Yeah. I think so.
Maybe the last one. There was so much range in that. What Fitz went through in that episode. Yeah. I love that scene where. I think my favorite scene, in addition to that last one I just mentioned, was the scene when I come in to the room having found out about the rape, and we don't say much, but Mellie's sitting on the couch, and she says, "You know," and I say, "I know," and she's being kind of bitchy with me before that, and then I just sit down and tell her, you know, and just hold her, and she says, "He's your son." I said, "It doesn't matter, I don't care." I thought that was very beautifully written, and Tom did a great job directing it. So anyway, yeah, I guess it would be the last one.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you said that, because I think that gives you pretty much everything you need to get yourself across the line for Emmy voters. And look, let's hope that it happens this time, Tony. I've been bitching about this for years, but it's really got to start happening for you guys, because
Bellamy and Joe just got Critics' Choice nominations.
I know, that's fantastic. Such great news for them too. So let's hope that it continues for you guys. And look, all the best for season 4. We don't know what's happening. Olivia's gone off with Jake, and Rowan Pope's the big bad, and the president has just lost his son. So look, we are really looking forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you again for your time, and good luck for the upcoming awards season.
Oh, thanks a lot. It was great talking to you again. Okay, bye.
Stop again. Thanks, mate.